Well, hello everyone and welcome. Thanks for joining us for another TAG virtual event. I'm Julie Fisher. I'm the Chief Experience Officer at the Technology Association of Georgia, affectionately known as TAG to our tech community. We're diving in today on a topic that's on the minds of many businesses and executives: manage workplace culture in a virtual world, and especially how do you shift to what is rapidly becoming a new normal. I'm joined today by some fantastic panelists, so I'd like to introduce them. Today we have Jeff Sawyer. He's the Managing Director at Accenture. We're also joined by Stephen Achata, Program Manager at Google Global Networking. And finally, Kim Trevison, CIO at Old Castle APG. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so pleased to have you all on. Frame up the conversation for our audiences today. We know that in the face of social distancing requirements, have had to really rapidly adapt to a new normal for the workplace. Push them into the position of crafting a very different approach in some respects to managing teams and keeping business moving, right? So what we're going to talk about today is how brands and businesses are really approaching the workplace culture idea in this virtual space. And especially, how do you cultivate that effectively? What are the best practices that you all are seeing in the marketplace and within your own companies? How do you deal with the stress and isolation and those components of managing your staff and the people that work for you? And then let's talk about that new normal. What is it going to look like when we try to go back? What will happen to our staff? So to get us kicked off, I'm just going to go around and ask each person what you're seeing within your own companies and the approach you're taking currently. So Jeff, I'll start with you. How is Accenture currently approaching this topic?
Yeah, well, Julie, thanks to you and TAG for hosting this. I think it's obviously a really timely and interesting topic. I guess to start off with, I'd say that at Accenture, we probably have a head start on this topic from most of our clients. I mean, our people, the traditional consulting model is our people are out on the road all the time. We're visiting clients. We're not, for the most part, historically at least, in the same office together every day. We're more out on the road and more at clients. So in that sense, we've got a head start in thinking about how we build and sustain and create culture in a dynamic virtual environment. Now, that's not to say that this isn't kind of an extreme change for us. It is, but I do think that experience and focusing on this topic in advance of the current crisis has helped us. We were already doing things focused on making sure we were building our culture and dealing with this reality that our people are on the road and virtual a lot. Now, what we've done, of course, is go to almost a fully virtual model today. Most of our people are, almost all of our people are now working remotely, working from home. So in a sense, what we've done is sort of turn the knob up, turn the heat up on what we were. Personally speaking, I spend a lot of time, and I'm encouraging my people to do this, to connect one-on-one with our folks. I don't think it's enough to just do virtual hangouts or virtual happy hours. We are doing those. We're doing a lot of town halls. We're doing a lot of social gatherings. A lot of teams are hosting, virtual happy hours or trivia contests or coffee chats. And I'd say absolutely and do more, but it doesn't, in my mind, take the place of the one-on-one connection. And so I'm dedicating a lot of my calendar time and a lot of my emotional and mental energy to connecting one-on-one with people, people above me in leadership, but absolutely people within the organization and people on my team. Because, it's not necessarily easy for everybody to engage in a group setting. And in some cases, I think it's even harder in a virtual group setting because it's sort of easier to stay quiet and stay isolated than if you're physically present. So that's some of the things that we're doing at Accenture and that I'm doing personally.
Right, sort of cultivating and making the most out of the virtual space and trying for that connectivity, which is essential. Stephen, I'll turn to you now. What are you seeing at Google related to this?
So, Julie, thanks again for having us here. This is a totally important topic, as Jeff alluded to. So, Google is approaching this by adapting our current existing video conferencing culture and capabilities, right? So, we also had a head start similar to Accenture because, fortunately for us, almost 40% of our workforce is involved in meetings that are in 2 or more geographic cities. So working using video conferencing is not new to us. We're also fortunate that our culture has promoted collaboration. So extending that collaboration to work from home has been almost a natural adoption, given the circumstances that we're in. But this doesn't make it any easier, right, Julie? I mean, we're better positioned technically, but we still, like other employees, like other companies, we still experience the mental strain, the emotional, the logistical stresses that COVID-19 and working from home has brought.
That makes so much sense. Kim, I'd like to turn to you now to talk about what's happening at Oldcastle during such an unprecedented time. Really, this is in a lot of ways very new for us.
It is very new for us as well. I would say to you that we have a bit of a unique situation where, from an IT standpoint, we're very familiar with working remotely. A majority of our people are not based in one location. We have folks offshore in different countries. So while this is the normal for a lot of IT folks in terms of collaborating in a remote nature, it is not necessarily commonplace for a lot of our stakeholders or our customers within our own organization. 80% of our organization cannot run a block machine from their house. So as a result, we had to really build a very interesting model that would help facilitate our back end or back office folks and functions and permit folks who have never worked remotely before to have not just the tools, but also the skill that they need in order to be able to collaborate in a new way. And so what I would say to you is that we spent a lot of our time, and while I think everybody sort of had a bit more of a heads up in terms of preparation, some of the challenges that we faced were a little bit different than companies that are primarily remote already, or in some cases already working in a very offline or online kind of way, right? So we had to find the right balance. For us, it was about, doing very tactical things like rolling out a collaboration platform for everybody, training folks on how to use some of these new tools and what does the new normal really look like. What does it mean to be a good participant in a virtual world, and what does that look like? What does that feel like? So our focus was really around the technology and making sure it was available to everybody, that people felt comfortable using it, and then really taking it to the next level. How do we get the most out of it? We're a relationship company. And so trying to find that sort of balance and keeping the communications open was critically important for us. All the while, safety and the security and the well-being of our people is also super important. So how do we then balance for those folks who were not able to work remotely? How were we able to then provide them with the tooling that they needed and put them in a situation where they were safe and they maintained their health through the social distancing components, through regular communication and so forth. And so definitely a different world when you're in the physical making of product. But certainly a great opportunity for us to be able to continue that collaboration and to continue the culture of all the relationship building that we do in a face-to-face environment.
And my gosh, what a lot of pressure for companies, right? Take on suddenly the idea that you've got to get on with business. At the same time, you have all these new things bearing down, right? You've got to, if you haven't already, teach your staff to work from home effectively. And then there's the human factor, which is very real. And that's coupled with what's going to happen next. How will we all come back together? When will we all come back together? So I'm curious to ask each of you now, what are the best practices you're seeing out there, right? You're seeing them within your own companies, but you're also seeing them in the marketplace. From your own perspectives, who's sort of leading the pack? Who's doing this well? What are the things you're seeing out there that you are drawing inspiration from? And Stephen, I'll start with you this time to give us a view of what you're seeing.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So the work from home conditions have really brought the best in a lot of us. And Google responded very early, very quickly to continue to build this culture of belonging. So I think that's one of the things to ensure that culture of belonging has to stay in place. That's definitely one of the top best practices there. So if I categorize some of our responses to employees versus community, as far as employees were concerned, one of the things that we did very quickly was to ensure that they're technically able to work remotely. So putting aside the essential services where people had to be physically present, what type of equipment do you need? How quickly can you get it? How best can we support you technically to ensure that you're able to work collaboratively? But beyond that was ensuring that managers understand the role that they play, because managers need to continue to care for their teams. So we've asked managers to work very closely with their teams to ensure there's a flexible schedule. Some people get more work done in the afternoon more than in the morning. So traditional schedules in this sort of environment may not be the way to go. Productivity is not just about what you're doing, but more importantly, when you're doing it. So having managers understand the flexibility that folks need is absolutely important. One of the things that Google realized very quickly was that work from home means putting people in a situation where they have to care for their family members. And so we extended carers leave up to 14 weeks. So 14 weeks of paid leave to take care of loved ones, or 28 weeks of half-time leave to parents and caregivers. So this type of caring for work from home Googlers was one of the things that we did very quickly to ensure that people are able to adapt to this work from home situation. Taking it to community and to our customers, we realized that a lot of people use Google products and Google Meet, and they have some needs that were not previously there. So our sense and respond to what our customers needed was very important. Our sense and respond to what our community needed was just as important. So we've created hubs for educators, for IT administrators, for the community to engage and collaborate in this type of environment. And so I think, Julie, beyond just caring for our employees, beyond just responding to our customers, was also the call to engage with our community and make sure that they're taken care of.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies are feeling that same way, that this is really a vital time. This is a critical time in many ways, very different than what we've ever seen before. Jeff, I'll turn to you now. What are some of the things you're seeing in the marketplace that you admire, draw inspiration from, or simply think these have got to be the best practices we're seeing out there? These are the critical things that need to happen.
Yeah, well, let me start by saying I really liked what Stephen said. I confess to being a biased opinion, but Google would always be at the top of my list to look to in terms of an example of doing things well. And I think I really liked how Stephen presented that. The Accenture perspective on that, we talk about a leadership quality or leadership DNA, and an element of that being truly human. And so, thinking about yourself and your team and your people, making sure you emphasize and understand the differences in people. And especially now, you have in this work from home mode, you have people who are taking care of their kids or potentially other family members, or involved in their child's education while they're also trying to balance work demands. So giving people the flexibility to take care of their personal and their professional responsibilities in the way that's right for them, respecting that and encouraging that. And that's always been a key part of the leadership DNA for Accenture. And I think in this time, we focused really hard on continuing to make that a priority and to continuing to seek that flexibility. It's one of the things that I've actually really enjoyed in these past weeks as we've done these virtual meetings. By the way, we heavily use video in our meetings. I think that's probably a best practice. Don't just be on the phone. Take advantage of the technology, and the intimacy that creates. Sometimes I've really found it touching and emotional that my colleagues have, in a sense, invited us into their homes, in their personal lives. Their kids are sometimes there. Maybe they're not all dressed up like they normally would be at the office. Their pets might join a call or a meeting now and again. I love that, and I think we've encouraged that, and that to me is consistent with the leadership DNA element of being truly human. And then I guess last thing I'll say is there's some great collaboration tools out there. I mean, nothing's going to take the place of an in-person dynamic session. I love those type of meetings. That's a lot of what I typically do with my day is leading clients in design thinking sessions. It's an intimate process, so it's a bit of a poor substitute. But there are some really powerful virtual collaboration tools, and we're becoming quite good, I would say, at using these tools, at facilitating these kinds of sessions, working with clients and in using these tools, and also internally at Accenture. So I suppose push the envelope when it comes to that type of technology. And I think we're finding out that there's some really interesting things we can do.
For certain. And, Kim, I'll turn to you. It's interesting because companies are really in the position now of having to do some of the things they really said they were doing all along, which is taking care of their people. And, we provide flexibility. And yes, they did, but they didn't really have to do this much, right? I'm not sure we were anticipating this level, right? So what are you seeing in the marketplace in terms of things you think are the right thing to do, companies that are really getting it right, and your own experiences?
Sure. And honestly, I think, this is one of those times where we have to acknowledge that this is not a traditional work from home scenario. I think as we think through work from home and leveraging collaboration tools, I think Jeff said it best in terms of this is not just about working remotely and engaging with your teams and creating that right environment. It's about bringing that full person into the mix. So inviting people into their homes, and while they're managing their kids and figuring out what's for dinner, and sort of living their lives. And that sort of really goes towards, we talk a lot about work-life balance and this concept that we work 8 hours at the office and 8 hours at the house. And I think it's so unattainable for so many of us. And for me personally, it's more about work-life integration. And I think that really gives us a bit more of that platform, and that's kind of the life that we're living now, that in between conference calls, I am helping with a math problem, or between, taking a design session, that we are actually talking about, what is Moderna, right? I'm not really quite sure. It's the most integrated, I think, for, again, my own personal experience, that this has sort of created for us to allow us to sort of perhaps learn what that new normal could look like from an integration standpoint. I think from a tooling standpoint, we've talked about that already, in terms of providing the right environment and collaboration tools. I think from a cultural standpoint, it is about people, right? All of our businesses are based on people, not just the employees, but our suppliers. It's about our customers. So how are we really helping to engage in a meaningful way? And yeah, you're right. Let's turn the video on so we can look at each other. I'll have to admit to you, I think this forum and this mechanism of communicating is actually so much more physically exhausting than it is about being in the office sometimes. I get off these conference calls and I'm in back-to-back meetings and videos. I think we take for granted body language, or the look on one's face, or the fact that the office door is closed. And I think, we're starting to see the blurring of those lines between this is my job and this is my home. It's just now, this is my life, right? So I think from that regard, it's been a bit of a learning experience for all of us. And I think the one thing that is always front of mind for me, because we lead big organizations of other leaders as well, is really about putting the person in the middle of that, right? So it's not about the tool, it's about how are you doing, right? So we do a couple of small things. Yes, of course, we do virtual happy hours so that we can talk about things other than work and really talk about and get to know each other, because we are such a relationship culture. We do the virtual coffee breaks where we do games. Like today, we're actually having a session with my solutions teams, and we're going through baby pictures, and you have to guess which baby picture belongs to which person. We're doing, what skills have you learned outside of the office when you're not doing your job? We've got people who've learned how to install electrical, and that fully immersive sort of experience in someone's life has actually been so awesome at being able to help continue to grow this team, right? So I would say, you know, from a best practices, it's leveraging the tools you have at your disposal, acknowledging that everyone is going to communicate a little bit differently. You know, Jeff had mentioned the one-on-one connection, which is so important. We do a gauge a couple of times a week, you know, on a scale of cat, which picture are you? And you've got different kind of looking cats or dogs or unicorns or whatever it is, just to get a pulse, because you don't get to physically see people and really see if they're carrying an extra burden. We know that there are folks out there who are doing more than their jobs. They've got the full-time job and the full-time job at home. So there's a lot, right? So I think it's really allowed us as leaders to really engage at a different level. And I think the word Jeff used was intimacy, right? It's a different level of relationship building. So I think we're all doing the best we can with the tooling we have and the circumstances we're presented with. You know, is there a standout company that's doing it brilliantly than another? I would say that we're all doing the best that we can. So, you know, it's hard to pinpoint exactly who in the market is really leading the pack in terms of collaboration, because I think it truly is we're all in this together, and we really are all trying to put the best interest of each other first. And from our own company perspective, that is the way we operate. So.
Yeah, interesting. And you know, you mentioned integration, right? So we've got this concept of workplace culture, and now how do we do this? Is that important still? Yes, is the answer, but it looks so different now. It has been something for so long that companies hold up in some respects as a way to entice new employees. They can talk about, you know, the office environment and the flexibility, and that's been workplace culture to date, you know, plus or minus lots of things under that banner. Now workplace culture in a virtual world. How do you instill that? What we're doing right now is just best tactics for keeping things going, right? Keeping people in good shape mentally, keeping business moving. But workplace culture is a little bit different in that it's the flavor and personality of your company. What derive, you know, what distinguishes you in the marketplace. And so how does that manifest itself in the new virtual world? And Stephen, I'm going to throw this to you because we've talked a little bit about the notion even of something like inclusion right now. You know, that's something that's very important to companies as a part of workforce culture. How do we embody inclusion? What does inclusion mean? What are the normal things about workplace culture? What do those mean now in a virtual world?
Julie, this is definitely a topic that has to be top of mind for all companies, right? So I go back to leaders playing a major role more than ever, standing up for everyone, right? So not everyone has the same ideal home environment. Not everyone has the same access, schedule, or even the same space, right? Some people are literally being forced to work out of their garages, out of their bedrooms, out of living shared spaces with their family. This can be very intimidating, and even more importantly, it can be very exposing, right? It can expose a lot of vulnerability that didn't exist before. So it's important to create a virtual safe space and be very empathetic. Inclusion, in this sense, also means modeling vulnerability. So I think leaders have to model that vulnerability. They need to say, I'm having a difficult time. I'm having to juggle what's going on with my family and others. Being able to model that vulnerability allows for other people to feel safe in speaking up and talking about the vulnerabilities they had. So Julie, I'll share a story. One of my colleagues in one of our meetings, we were all talking about the stress of family and kids coming in between meetings and the dogs barking like Jeff and Kim talked about. And one of the people in the meeting said, at least you have family that you can talk to. At least you have pets that you can see. I am by myself. Going to work was my opportunity to see other people, but now I can't go to work. And so thinking about someone like that, how do you include them? So even as we talk about the activities that we're doing to ensure that people feel a sense of belonging, we also have to think about those people who maybe feel exposed when those things come up. Based on early research, we also saw that people in underrepresented groups are likely to be impacted disproportionately more in general. And so managers need to explore different forms, different formats of connecting with people. Maybe there's a side chat where you ping someone and say, hey, how are you doing? Is there something you want to talk about? Closed caption, accessibility, making sure that people who in the past you'd be able to see some of the limitations that they have in terms of access, that they're able to express those in some sort of way. Managers have to help people speak up, and they have to formulate some strategy to allow inclusion even in this collaborative environment. And I go back to the whole culture of belonging, making sure that everyone feels that they belong.
You know, which is so vital and certainly so important for companies. And Jeff, I think you brought up that human factor, right? Our humanity is really showing right now, which is a good thing. Also a challenge for employers to address the different the different things that their employees face. Maybe some people are reluctant to speak up. Maybe they're not comfortable with the technology, the video conferencing. They're having to learn a new skill while trying to, keep an even keel in terms of fulfilling their duties. And let's get real. We are in our homes. We are absolutely, as Kim points out, dealing with children running around and, the various stresses, not to mention just outside of the door, a looming specter of doom with a, seemingly life or death, situation. I mean, there's a lot crashing in on us as humans, how to manage that as a leader. And I'll take it to you, Jeff, to tell us what you think about that.
Well, I think what Stephen said about a leader modeling behavior is absolutely right. We had a program here called Inclusion Starts with I. Obviously, it does alphabetically, but what that means is that it's up to leaders to take the action to engage with people, to make them, to include them. And maybe, if I reflect on it a little bit, maybe being in person, being in the office, to me was a bit of a crutch in a sense. It was easier, at least, right? It was natural. It was in passing, it was just sort of normal human social behavior, and it felt like you were doing that. That those activities were including people, making them feel included. I wonder if maybe I was wrong, that I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't doing enough proactively and actively and in an organized fashion. And because that's what we have to do in this environment, right? I mean, you have to be extra, and maybe this is why the days feel longer in one sense, is because we have to do that. We have to make a plan. We have to think about it. We have to reach out to people. We have to engage with people. It's not an easy thing just to do in passing. That's not a possible model anymore.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to mention that we've done at Accenture that I really love, I mentioned that we struggled with our natural virtual environment, being on the road and things like that, and the desire to have a strong culture, connections between people. So about a year ago, we started doing what we called First Fridays. There's many, many, many opportunities to be involved within Accenture, whether that is employee resource groups or nonprofit activities, volunteering, or many other business type groups as well. And so we started organizing the first Friday of every month, what we called First Friday. And the idea was to create a critical mass of people and activities in our office on that first Friday. And we developed really strong agendas. We would buy breakfast and lunch for people, have a happy hour at the end of the day, and really make that first Friday about coming together as a people in the entire office in Atlanta, for example. And that was very successful and very powerful. Well, now we're doing that virtually, and we're doing it not just in Atlanta, but we're doing it across all of this region, the South, for us. And we're doing it the same way. So agendas and programs to bring all kinds of people together on different topics to make it really feel like this virtual environment, and to focus on topics like inclusion. I think one other thing I wanted to mention about inclusion is as much as we might believe it's a morally good thing to do, it's actually, our research shows it is an economic decision to make. It is a powerful driver of economic benefit. If people feel included at work, they do better. They strive to be more. They work harder. And so inclusion has a dramatic impact on the performance of those that are included. And so leaders and companies that choose to focus on inclusion do better. And so I think we need to understand that as a factor. Also, our research shows that people in management, that our leadership, the perception of how successful we are being when it comes to building culture and including everyone is a much different perception at a leadership level than it is at a more junior level. It might be the case that that younger employees even crave and value this more in their experience than maybe those of us who have been in business a long time. But it's certainly, there's a disconnect, and our research shows, between how we think we're doing at a leadership level and how our employees are feeling and perceiving that. So in my own personal work, I take that as inspiration and to do more, to think more, to try harder, to reach out more to individuals, and to and this belief that even if I feel like I'm doing a lot, I probably need to push myself to do more when it comes to this area.
I think that must be a very common feeling among leaders. You know, how do I do the most in this situation given the circumstances? And Kim, I want to turn to you now. Before we talk about the new normal and what it's going to look like to get back to business, talk to us again about why is it so important to foster workplace culture in this current environment? Why does that continue to be such an important thing to do? And how does that help deliver results? How does that help a business maintain continuity and to the future?
So, you know, I think corporate culture is so much more beyond whether we're physically together or physically dispersed, to be honest. I think culture really is it's the juice in the engine that gets us moving, right? You know, I mentioned before that our company is very much a relationship-driven culture. We believe in supporting one another, and we believe in supporting our customers, and we do what we can, serve every day. Every one of us is here to serve and to execute their role. So I would say to you that in truthfulness, the culture, it hasn't really changed because it's the foundation of who we are as an organization. I think what it's done is it allowed us to really dig a little bit deeper, right? And really allow us to sort of ask the questions a lot more directly, right? Because I think there's always an assumption, you know, are you okay? If you're in the office, you're like, hey, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm doing good. And it's kind of a brush off answer because you're walking past each other in the kitchen, whereas now it's so much more deliberate in terms of, you know, how are you? Are you doing okay? How's your family? How's the situation at home? And it's not because you're trying to pry, but it's because you really genuinely care. And so what I would say is that culture of genuine care is just, it's obvious to people in the organization. They want to be part of an organization that genuinely cares about them, that gives them meaningful work to actually execute, and allows them to use their superpowers to really deliver on their commitments to our customers and to their stakeholders. And so what I would say to you is that we've continued that culture. Just because we're physically dispersed, it's still the underpinning of everything that we do. It's in every conversation where we have our daily stand-ups to talk about what are some of the impediments. It's in every conversation we have when it's meant to be a bit more jovial, when we're having our virtual coffee hours with that, how are you doing, and you know, how are you physically adapting to this new environment. I think one of the interesting points is that you sort of learn a little bit more about each individual in this situation, whereas before, when you're sitting in a team environment, it's sort of a bit more of the team comes together and we think about it. But now the more deliberate approach to the one-on-one communication has allowed us to learn more about individuals, to understand what their preferences are. Maybe they don't like video, maybe they prefer to be on the phone, maybe they prefer an IM versus not. We can ask these questions now because we're literally faced with having to figure out the mechanism that works for each. And so it really is more around understanding how people want to be treated and treating them that way, so that we can make sure that we are not just getting the best out of, for outcomes for our customers and for our business, but getting that individual is getting the most out of their interaction with us as well. We want to continue to create an environment where people want to come back to the office, because they want to be with their friends and their peers, so they can solve problems that are, that we want to solve, and we can design good solutions together. I want them to come back to that. And I think the way that we are, connecting with each other now is going to permit us to have an even deeper, better, more inclusive relationship. We are all back in the office, and we can be more face to face. So I would say to you that, has it changed, and what does that new normal look like? I would say the culture remains unchanged. It's the foundation of how we're trying to build our teams and drive forward and deliver and on commitments, etc. And in regard to the new normal, I don't know that anybody truly knows what that fully looks like yet, because I would suggest to you that there is pieces of this new world that we're living today, as we're sort of navigating through, that will absolutely remain as we continue to come back together again. And there are other pieces that, like the virtual happy hours, I'm hoping they can be physical happy hours as opposed to just the virtual ones, that we can continue some of that deep relationship building and when we're back together. But I think that it's early days to understand what goodness that we're going to take out of, what is quite a tragic crisis, to be able to sort of say, what will that, continue through and thread through as we continue through the journey.
Yeah, it's interesting because, now we're ready for the next pivot, right? No sooner have we gotten used to, oh, okay, we're sheltering in place. Oh, okay, so that means this. And okay, now I must do this for my employees. All right, this is what I'm going to do. Then all of a sudden, oh, we're reopening. Okay, now we're looking at reopening. So what does that mean? And how do we do that now? And as you point out, Kim, how do we take the really good things we just learned and fold them into a physical environment? And will people want to come back? How do we have them come back? What will that look like? So Jeff, I'll turn to you just to talk about your thoughts on what we think the new normal is going to be. What is that going to look like? And gosh, please grab your crystal ball along with the rest of us and help us understand when we think that might happen too.
Oh, Lord. I don't know. I feel like my crystal ball has been cloudy lately. I guess I would say that, first of all, I think that we were underutilizing technology and options for virtualization previous to this. So I think more often than not at Accenture, we were probably pushing clients and partners to explore virtualization more quickly than they thought was reasonable or doable. And so in this period of being forced to do that, I think many companies, many of our clients have realized actually there's a lot that could be virtual, and that there are many advantages to being virtual. Think about how frantic, we all live in Atlanta, right? We're known as a city with bad traffic. It's true. All of that getting around, getting from place to place, there's a lot of energy, human energy and fuel and time and pollution and car accidents and spending on infrastructure that goes into enabling all that to be the case. So if we can find a future where we're in better balance, where we're making use of all of the tools in our society's tool chest in a more optimum way, I think that we have at least the opportunity to do that. As to when and how and in what degrees, I hesitate to predict it. I think you'll see gradually things approaching a new normal over time. I hope, and I miss being in the office and miss being with people physically in the office. I hope that comes back soon, but I don't think the new normal looks a lot like the old one. I mean, I think that there's at least the opportunity for us to make that a good thing.
Yeah, thank you. And Stephen, I'm going to close out with you. Can you talk to us about what the new normal is going to look like? What do you think?
So I agree with everything that Jeff said. So work from home has truly stretched the capabilities of several companies. And frankly, Julie, the theoretics and business continuity planning has totally been tested. From curbside pickup to renting gym equipment to think about, telemedicine, right? So twice I've had to take my kids to see doctors. Twice the doctors have not seen them physically, but I've seen them using the phone. So I do think the new normal will be continuing to supplement physical interactions with virtual collaboration, either through preference or due to pressure from the customer saying, this is how we want to work moving forward, to Jeff's point. However, a colleague of mine said that maybe this was the world's way to tell us that we need to take a time out, to sort of smell the roses, so to speak. So in the midst of this stress and uncertainty, I firmly believe that we've grown to be more compassionate globally. And I'm hoping that with the new normal, that continues to stay solid and that it becomes something natural for all of us versus, oh, that was then, now let's get back to work. In terms of next steps, I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I do believe that this is going to be a very huge shock for employees. Jeff talked about traffic. Imagine the shock of the commute back to the offices here in Atlanta. That's going to be terrible. It's important to understand that as folks come in, they may feel a sense of loss, that now they no longer have the same family support and integration that they did before. But even in terms of production and capabilities, that they may have a sense of imposter syndrome. You come back to work after, 3 or 4 months and you ask yourself, have I really been productive? What was expected of me in those 3 or 4 months? So again, goes back to the managers and leaders, bringing people in slowly and reassuring them that they're still valued and that even though they were away from work those 3 or 4 months, that their work really mattered. Julie, totally need to give a shout out to all the critical services, right? For them, I'm hoping the new normal will signal relaxation, will signal less stress because of not having to do all the things that they've done. And so I'm looking forward to that new normal.
As I think we all are. I mean, what an interesting time. What a very important topic. So I want to say thank you to each of you for just taking time out of your busy day today to get on yet another virtual call. We all looked crisp and great. Our internets worked. Thumbs up there. And, we'll be having this conversation again, right? This is not the last time we'll all talk about these very important topics. I think hopefully you all feel how important it is for you to join us today and talk to the audience about something that is on everyone's mind that will bear out in big ways in the near future. So thank you, all of you, for joining us. For those of you listening, thank you for joining us. You can find a link to this recording at any time on tagonline.org. And there at tagonline.org on our website, you can find all of our virtual event offerings. We are pushing out as many as we can to help keep this technology community connected. Thank you once again, and I hope that you all will stay safe and well. We'll talk to you again soon.